Hey everyone, Ray here with Rinksworks. Today's video, I'm going to show you how I built this top for this kitchen rack that's used to store pots and pans, and it's a wire rack on wheels. And rather than just having the wire rack up on top, I built this to give it a sturdy countertop type base. It's made out of several different kinds of hardwoods. And if you're interested in seeing how I built it, then stay tuned and I'll show you. And we'll get started right now. So the rack is a little over 18 by 5 foot, or it's 18 by 5 foot. I'm going to probably extend the top probably an inch on all four ends so that it hangs over a little bit. And then these are the holes where the legs come up through. And they stick out about yay high, just a little bit. So I'll probably, once the top's done, I'll probably bore some holes that don't go all the way through the top so the top can just set down on there and be secured so it's not going to slide off or anything like that. So we are going to do an edge grain top, meaning that we're going to put strips of wood in like this, whoops, lined up, and that will make the top surface. Now we could do face grain, that's face grain, and it would be a little cheaper, but they also have more tendency to warp. So by putting a whole bunch of boards in like this, it will be more expensive, but it'll also make it stronger, and the people that I'm building this for also want that look. So kind of a no-brainer. So I've had some wood acclimating in my shop now for about 3 or 4 days. Right now I have it all squished together. It was separated so that it could breathe, but I've got walnut, maple, hard rock maple, cherry, and some hickory. So the first thing we have to do, I did notice, unfortunately, and the walnut is the most expensive of all this wood that I bought. This outer piece is walnut. You see it's got a pretty good bow in it. And I didn't notice that when I bought it. Somehow that escaped me. But that seems to be the only one with a really bad bow. So I'm going to have to get that out of there first. And hopefully that's not going to run me short on lumber. It might. But if it does, I'll come up with a plan. So I was expecting to get at least 2 pieces out of this. And now with that bow in it, I probably will not be able to do that. So I got this piece of plywood. This is the factory edge here. I'm going to cut about 7 inches off of it. I already got my fence set up to 7 inches. I'm going to cut like 7 inches off of it and use it as a sled, because now we'll have a nice factory straight edge to run along the fence. We'll attach this to the top edge of it and then cut this off. So you'll see that in a second. Okay, now that I got this piece cut, I got a good straight edge, obviously, to go along the fence, and this is a straight edge as well. And if I put this on here now and just line up the 2 outer points, you can really see how much this board is bowed. Terrible purchase, but so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it this is the deepest part of the bow. I'm going to bring it just past the edge of our sled and affix it to this piece. You could do it with a couple screws, as long as you don't go through this, obviously. But I'm just going to use some double back tape, and I'm just going to kind of mark where this is so I know where to put my tape, or where not to put my tape, either way. All right, that should do it. Now we can run it through a pass and straighten it out. Dumb, I put the camera right in the way. All right, now we have a pretty straight edge on one side. So I'm going to check all the other boards, see if we need to do that to any of the other ones. Okay, I just did the second piece of walnut like I did the first. I think I'll probably end up running all of these boards through. Okay, all those pieces down there have been run through the table saw on the sled to get the bow out of them. So we have at least one pretty good edge on each of those. The only one I have left is this piece of cherry, which is a thick 1.5 inch, piece of cherry. And this one really has almost no bow in it, so I don't need to do anything with this one. But what I am going to do with this, because it is so heavy, is I'm gonna be able to get 4 slats out of this. So I'm gonna cut 4 pieces off of here at 2 3/8 of an inch. So 2 3/8. Our top, we want it to be 2 inches thick. So if we cut 2 3/8 and then set it up like this, because that'll then make the top, this edge here, that'll give us 3/8 of an inch to work with to start milling everything square. Okay, so here's the 4 pieces we just got out of that hunk of cherry. They're all 2 3/8 of an inch. Again, that's to try to give us, we're shooting for 2 inches. So that gives us a little bit of room to continue milling this all square and flat. Now here's some of the other pieces we're getting ready to do. So I am shooting for 2 inches. However, it's not a requirement. If I need to go a little bit thinner to save wood, I will. All right, we got all of our strips cut down. Of course, they're oversized in widths to account for the machining we're going to be doing to it. Our table is 18 inches wide, but we wanted to go 2 extra inches so we have some overhang. Right now we're at about 22 and a half. Of course, I'm trying to kind of push these together with my hip, but so 18, 19, 20. So we got about 2 inches bigger than what we're shooting for, which is hopefully going to be enough because we still have to mill all these down. So I think what we'll do now is we'll take all the pieces like this one here, and we'll get this cut off and then get them to a length that's about, I'm going to shoot for 5 or 6 inches longer than what we're actually going for. Okay, I'm going to go through, cut all of them. I'm going to get all the bad ends cut off, making sure that we still have plenty left over to get to our length. Once I get all all the ends trimmed off of one side, then we'll probably set up a stop block so that we can cut them all to the exact same length. So here they are all cut. This is the cut side now on all of these. So now I'm going to set up a stop block in here, and then we'll use the cut side against the stop block and then cut them all to the same length. And what I'll do right now, all these are at different lengths. So what I'm going to do is I'll probably take the shortest board out of it. Whatever I can get out of the shortest board, I'll cut that one and cut all the rest to that size. So this is my shortest board out of the bunch. I've got this set up where we're going to have plenty of leftover. So I'm just going to set up a stop block here. It's going to screw it right to the bench. All right. All right. Now we have roughly shaped all of our lumber. But now what we need to do is we actually need to make everything square and flat. If you look, you can see gaps down here. That's because everything's not square and flat. So what we need to do first and foremost, and I think we'll just talk about the steps as we go, rather than me explaining the whole thing up front. The first thing we want to do is flatten the face of each board. So we're going to use the joiner to do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to run this through. And I just wanted to show you an example here. If you look, you see some space here. If I push down on it, I can get that out there. That just means that this board is bowed a little bit like this. So we're going to be working on flattening this face down here. And we're going to run it through the joiner until that bottom edge is flat. So we're just going to run it through this way. At this point, it doesn't have to be up against the fence. We just got to make sure it's flat when we run it through. Now, the fact that it's bowed means that when we start running it through, it's going to cut on this edge. And as it gets towards the middle, it's not going to cut so much because it's boards like this. And then when we get towards the end, it'll start cutting more. If I was to put pressure on this in the center while I'm running it through, I'm not necessarily straightening that bow out. So you have to be aware of just keeping the pressure mostly on the outfeed side of the table so that's actually flattening that bottom edge. So I'll just show you an example now. We'll flatten each one. All right, a couple quick words about my joiner and joiners in general. First, this is the guard. As you're pushing your wood through, it should go past, and then this should snap back. Notice mine does not. There's a spring mechanism in here that's supposed to close this, and mine is broken. I fixed it a couple times, but it doesn't seem to stay fixed, so someday I'll have to look at that. Secondly, I'm using these to push my wood through so my fingers are not getting anywhere near that blade. And then thirdly, since all my wood is the same, almost exactly the same width here, remember we're flattening a face, I'm going to just bring my table as close as I can. Because my guard doesn't work, I'm just going to bring this table in so that I don't have a lot of exposed blade or any more than I need. So that's the amount of blade that I have exposed. As I flatten, I'll probably flatten the face, that first face, and I'll probably then put a little pencil mark on it so I know which side I just flattened, because we're going to run them all through, flatten one face, which will be the bottom side, and then I'm going to put them over on my workbench, which is completely clean now. There's no debris, nothing on there, because now we're at the point where we start setting wood down. If you start setting it on chips and whatever, you'll start denting it, and we want to keep the wood pristine now as we start actually milling it. All right, let me set this up. All right, let's run it through. Now what you should hear is, you'll hear as I run it through, you'll hear it start cutting. And then at some point you'll probably hear it stop cutting because then we hit that bow in this wood. And then we keep sliding through and it'll pick up again. We keep doing that until it's cutting the whole way through, and then we know that side's flat. Okay, so hopefully you heard that. Eventually, we cut the whole way through. So now this side's flat. I'm going to go lay it down flat side on the workbench and run all the other pieces through the same way. Okay, all of our bottom surfaces or faces have been run through the joiner, so we have a flat surface on the bottom of each of these. Now what we're going to do is run them through the planer with the side down that we just got done running through the joiner, and then that will parallel the top to the bottom side in our attempt to get all these squared up. So then we'll have two parallel faces. So I did make it a little harder on myself. You notice there's basically three different thicknesses of wood that I have. Because I wasn't worried about having each piece of the tabletop exactly the same, and because of what I could purchase at the lumber yard, I have these different thicknesses. So it does make it a little harder. I can't just run them all through the planer all at the same time. So I'm going to start with all the ones that are the thickest, run those through first, get those surfaces paralleled, and then move on to the middle size and then the thinner size. And if you're asking, well, why didn't we just run it through the planer the first time, or first, why do we have to run it through the joiner? It's because the planer will follow whatever the bottom surface of the wood is. So if the wood is bowed, the planer will cut it, but it will follow the bow. Whereas we took the bow out on one surface, now we're going to parallel the top surface using the planer. So let's get set up. I'm going to move all these pieces off of the table here, and as you can see, the way I have my planer, this is just a table that's a little bit longer than I made to help steady everything that, when I'm doing longer pieces like this. But it'll go through and follow the workbench as a landing spot. So let's do it. All the faces are flat. Let's see how much we lost. Let's see how much width we lost on our table. by milling all that stuff. I think we were shooting for 20 inches, and we are at 19 3/8. And that's unfortunate, but I also kind of expected it. So, I mean, we're still wider than the rack is, so it would still overhang a little bit. But let me think on that a minute. All right, look what I have. I think I might have mentioned this before. I have these 12-foot long pieces of teak. They're exactly 1/4 inch thick. So I could get 4 of them out of here, but I'm just gonna use 3 pieces. I think that'll get us to back to our 20-inch width, and that works out nice. I've been dragging these pieces around. I have several more for probably close to 25 years now. I drove them all the way across country because I just couldn't bear to get rid of them. I got them from my dad. I don't know can't remember exactly where he got them from. I'll have to ask him. But I have used them for making a couple guitar necks where I've done like maple on the outsides and a streak of this teak down the center, and I have plenty more to make some more. So I'm not going to run out of it. And I mean, like I said, I've been dragging it around for all these years. I might as well use it for something, and this is a good project for it. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to cut these to length. They're already milled nicely on both faces, so I'm not going to do any milling, I don't think. There's going to be some bumps and bruises on the edges of these, and of course, since they're going to be standing upright, we'll just have to cut off some of that. But these are already wider than these anyway, so that'll work out just fine. So I'll cut them to length and then rip them to get a good clean edge on them, and then when we rip all of these to size, we'll do these at the same time. So we cut them to length now. All right. All right, we got our 20 inches back. So now we've got flat and parallel faces on each board. What we need to do now is square up the edges to the faces. They may look fairly square, but they're not necessarily. So we're going to run each edge now through the joiner, and that will square up the edge to one of the faces. And then we'll probably rip them on the table saw to square up the whole thing after that. So get the joiner set up. That's next. The other thing you want to make sure to do before you get started is make sure your table and your fence are absolute 90 degree. Because if they're not, you're not going to get everything square. Bottom edge is what we just ran through the joiner. Now I'll know the side to cut. Now I'm going to get them all run through just like that one. Alright, this is the board that I screwed up the most and jointed off the most material off of while I was trying to figure out how to get a good straight joint on this. So I'm going to use a table saw and I'm going to cut this one. Again, I've got my blue X on the side that needs to be cut. So I'm going to run this through the table saw. I'm going to set it up to cut this board as wide as I possibly can. And then I'm going to run all the rest through and then they'll all be the same. So let's do it. All right, well, look at that. Everything is now at the same width. So I don't know how well the camera will pick this up, but if I pull these and squeeze them together, it makes everything pretty tight. Now we can start organizing how we want our boards, like these three thin pieces. Maybe we want them on the outside, like so, and maybe like one in the middle-ish, and some of maybe the darker ones. You know, so we can kind of start playing with how we want this thing to look. Whoops. But I think at this point, I think we're done tonight with all the cutting and stuff. You see some burns from the blades and that. And here at Rinksworks, we call that character marks. So we'll figure it out and decide how we want to maybe. See, these thin boards keep falling off, so. But once we get everything together, it actually looks pretty darn nice. We just got to figure out our pattern. And I've learned that the best way to probably like figure out stuff like this, now that we're done with all the spinning, sharp, dangerous stuff, is to stand around and think about it for a minute. So for the rest of tonight, that's what we're going to do. We're going to stand around, think about it, start coming up with our next game plan, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Alright, I messed around with these boards for a little bit. I'm sure I'll get some disagreements, but this is the pattern I'm going with. And by a pattern, I mean completely random way that I aligned these boards. I actually like the way it looks, so that's what I'm going to go with. So, I'm going to clean this junk off the back of the bench here. I'll clean all the dust and stuff off the table saw so I can set these over there. And I'll get some probably wax paper or just paper, whatever, down on this bench. And we'll start gluing it up. Real quick before I move these over onto the saw and clean off this bench, I just labeled these. Just because I'll probably do something stupid and forgot which direction I had them or something, but now I know. Why does it always take a big project to get me to clean my workbench? I mean, why can't I just keep it this way? It's so nice. And I'll finish this project in a couple days. I'll probably drive the Nova in here, start changing out the door skins, and this will be a big pile of grease and mess again. Okay, so I've been doing a lot of thinking about how I want to glue this up. Whether I want to glue it all up at once, which might be difficult just from a timing standpoint. And the other thing, if I do that, it's going to be a lot more sanding, because even though these are all cut to the same width, you know, there's a little bit of movement, and it's going to be pretty difficult. So what I'm thinking, I might glue this in thirds, where I go a third, and a third. And what that also will allow me to do is pass them through the planer just to skim off the top. And that should create less sanding, and then just glue all the three together at the end. I can, you know, I still have plenty of thickness here. So I think I'm going to glue it in thirds, give them a quick pass through the planer, back to back to back, get them all smooth, and then there's only going to be 3 joints, or 2 joints, that will have to be kind of cleaned up and sanded at the end. Okay. I glued up the first set. I decided to do a set of 3s. So I glued up the first set just so I could work out the bugs before I let you watch me struggle with it. You can see this here. This is from the Snipe. And they're definitely going to have to take a trip through the planer when they're done, because it's pretty hard to keep them all nice and level. But anyway, so I glued up the first set. I'm getting ready to glue up this set. What I'm doing is I've got all my clamps set out here. I've got 2 scrap pieces on each end so that when we clamp it, we're denting those and not denting the tabletop. Okay, I'm pretty sure I told you that you were going to watch me glue up the second set, except for the part where I forgot to start the camera. Well, I didn't forget. I thought I started it, but I didn't start it. So you're going to watch me glue up the third and final set. So let's hope I don't screw this one up. So, spread some glue, and then I'm going to use this weenie roller to roll the glue out. Basically what you want is to spread it out and basically have it opaque. So the very first set, I think I was a little thin on the glue. I don't think it's going to be an issue, but it was a little thin. And the second set I glued up that you didn't get to watch came out better, so I'm going to try to do this one the same way, basically. And it's a good thing I bought 2 bottles of glue, because I'm not probably going to make it. Okay, if I did my editing correctly, and you're back with me normal speed, and we're going to get these, whoops, well, look at me making a mess. Oh, it's a damp rag that I'm going to be using here in a minute. Let me let that dry off. Turn it. Again, you don't want your clamps super tight. All right, I've got the glue worked in there. Yeah, we'll see how it comes out. It'll be okay. We're gonna make it work. Now this is just a damp towel, a damp rag. So I'm gonna just clean off some of this glue, and then there is another way to do it. If you don't want to use a damp towel, you can also just wait for it to start to harden up for about probably 20 minutes or so, and then you can take a scraper and just scrape it off once it starts to get to be like rubber before it completely dries. But I'm going to put a couple clamps on top, and this will give it something to rest on, so I'm not setting it down into all that glue on the table. Okay, it's been about 25 or 30 minutes, and now I'm just going to use a scraper and just scrape off this. The glue's kind of like rubbery now, so I'm just going to go through the whole thing and scrape it off. Okay, we got our pieces ready to run through the planer. That'll just help clean these up. I did mark them on the ends because the pencil marks are going to go away as these go through the planer. First thing I'm going to do though is I've got 2 sacrificial pieces that I'm going to rip on the table saw the same width as these. And what that will allow is, when we start the planer up, we're going to run one piece through first, and then we'll take our top pieces and get them right behind this. And what that'll hopefully do is keep the snipe down, because that way this will already be under the cutter head, so the cutter head won't slam into this. And then the same with at the end. So these are going to have to go back to back to back, which also means that I'm going to be running back and forth, moving them out of the way. And then when the last piece goes through, the other sacrificial piece will follow it, again, keeping the cutter head from digging into the end of the good stuff as it goes through. So let me rip these on the table saw real quick, and then we'll start. Okay, I'll see if that's enough. If not, maybe they'll go one more pass, and then I'll flip them and do a pass that way. You don't need to watch, you see how I'm doing it. I just wanted to give you kind of a close-up of before and after. So all three of these went through the planer 3 times, and that's enough for the first side. But you can see now how nice that looks. This one here, it's nice on the other side. I just flipped it over to sort of contrast and show you kind of more close-up, because I don't think I did. So you can see, hopefully just by my finger going across it, that they're not all perfect, because, you know, just the glue up process itself, unless I was to like dowel each piece so that they perfectly lined up. So I expected this. So now we'll flip them all over and run them all through one more time. And then most likely after that, I will probably have to take these pieces and run them through the table saw just to square up that edge perfectly so that they line up good. And I'll kind of show you that once we get to that point. So we'll give them another trip through the planer on to clean up that side. And of course these other two. And I'll show you my system over here. I've got this 50-gallon trash can, or 30-gallon, whatever it is. And I'm just setting them on here so that I can lift them up and get them to run through. So that's how I'm doing it. All right, let's glue it up. So I've got 10 clamps. I'm going to put 5 on the bottom and 5 on top. And I'm not going to make you watch this whole thing. I think what I'll do is I'm just kind of spacing these out somewhat equal. I think what I'll do is I'll put you on fast forward, maybe, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 times, or excuse me, 20 times speed. I always think that's kind of funny to watch anyway. So I'm going to put you on high speed now. You can watch me glue this up. And if you're on high speed, I can put my tunes on and you won't be able to hear it, which means I won't get copyrighted. So, see you in a little bit. So it's set for a few hours. I'm going to unclamp it now and get the clamp set up to do the next glue. Okay, I'll glue that in. You don't need to watch it again. It's all glued up. I have a couple of high spots at the seams, but not too bad. I'll be using this 5-inch orbital random orbit sander. We'll be doing 80 grit, and I got some 120 grit, and I was surprised I actually had some 150 grit, and I've got some 220 grit that we'll finish up with. I've got my vacuum attached to my sander to help keep the mess down. So that's what we're going to do now. So I'll be sanding for the next few hours. Enjoy watching that. Not just kidding, you're not going to watch it. But we'll start out with 80, get everything down to 80 grit, smooth, and go from there. Okay, so I'm mostly just sanding the seams. I did go get some 60 grit paper. The 80 was just, it was too slow because I had some bigger seams here than I wish we had had. But so I'm concentrating on these seams. I am keeping the sander flat though. You could be tempted to go, oh, I can feel that, and tilt this thing sideways and try to grind that out of there, but then you're just going to create a dip. So be patient and keep your sander, light pressure and keep it flat. And you just got to keep kind of working it out, sort of feathering it out. If you like, I had a little bit of a gap here, so I'm working on this, but then I'm kind of just feathering it out, and we'll eventually get there. All right, hour 835. I'm still sanding. Okay, it hasn't been that long. Here's one of my seams here, and the other seam is right here. So you can probably see I've got some glue on here, but if I didn't have that, but I still had like a high spot, if you did a better job of cleaning your glue off, and you didn't have any glue there, rather than having to keep feeling over this, you can put some pencil marks across and keeping your sander flat, but making big sweeping paths because you don't want to concentrate on one area. You'll get to see with these pencil marks, once they start disappearing, you'll know you're getting flatter and flatter. All right, I've got the top sanded down to about, well, not to about, I have it sanded down to 80 grit. But before I go any further, I think we're going to go ahead and cut off the ends and probably do our routing around the edge and get that all done before we go any further on the sanding. I'm just using my big drywall square here. I checked it for square to make sure it was actually good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the line here where I want to cut this. And I'm going to try to use, I'm going to go right on the edge of where I have the best material, you know, because we do have a few gaps out here. So I'm going to go right on the edge of that, which I sort of already marked, but I just did it really lightly to make sure it was where I wanted it. So now I'll measure 62 inches down that way and then mark that side to where it's going to get cut off. All right, I'm going to cut this using my old circular saw that I've had for years and years. I've got a brand new 62 blade here that I've had for a while. I'm going to try that on this crosscut. It's pretty thick material, but I want to get a fairly clean cut on it, so I'm going to give that a try. I've also got this, what they call a plywood blade. I usually know of plywood blades being much more fine-toothed, but that may be an option as well. Let me give this one a shot first. But throw down in the comments what blades you would use for something like this, because I'm curious what other guys would give it would try. All right, I drilled the 2 holes already on the other side. And once I got the depth I wanted, which is 1.1 inches, I put this piece of tape on here so that I wouldn't have to keep stopping and measuring. So as soon as I get close, then I can start sneaking up on it and measure it, because I want them all exactly the same so that if it's sitting just on the posts, it won't rock. In case you're wondering what I was using to drill these holes, Forstner bit set. They are super handy. Okay, I have 2 roundover bits. One's a 3/8 and one is a 1/4 inch. I think we're going to try the 1/4 inch. Hopefully it's good and sharp, because we're going to go around that end grain, and that's going to be needing a good sharp router bit. So we'll take it easy in the beginning and make sure that it can handle it. Don't bury your bit all the way in the bottom. It makes it much harder to get out. Leave it just up from the bottom. And what I'm going to do is set it up to where the base plate is right at this curve right here. I don't want this part of the bit cutting in, because then it'll leave a different profile. All I'm trying to do is round it over. I don't want any sort of other profile. So I'm going to put it right at that point. Okay, router's all set up. We're going to go around this edge. This is the bottom side. We're going to go around this edge and round this over. And we'll flip it and round over the other side. So how do I know which direction to go with the router? Basically, you're wanting to go against the spinning motion of the router. Much easier way to figure this out. If you're routing from the top, which a lot of your routing is going to be from, make a gun. Right hand only. And put your hand down on the board the edge you want to route. In this case, we want to route this edge. If your right thumb is on the board that you're wanting to route, you follow the direction of your finger. So we want to go this way. Here, same thing, we want to go this way. Here, we don't want to go that way, right? We want to go this way. So basically we're going to go counterclockwise around this whole thing. Now, let's say you have like a picture frame, and sorry for the crudity of this, but I think you'll understand it. Now you got a picture frame, and you want to route the outer edge. Same thing, right hand, thumb on your piece. So the outer edge, you're going to want to go counterclockwise, just like we're doing on this piece. But what if you want to do the inside? Well, now our thumb's not resting on the piece, so we have to go this way, clockwise. Thumb on the piece, clockwise. Anyway, just a quick little tip, so you don't have to figure it out each time. Only use your right hand. All right, I got this set up now so I can get all of the sides. There's nothing in the way going around the whole thing. I just did a final sanding with 80 grit on the top. Excuse me. The bottom side is already completely done sanded, and we'll talk about how far I took that here in a second, because we're going to do the top the same way. So I'm going to do. I just did 80 grit. Now I'm going to do 120 grit. And then I will do 220. I would actually like to stop at 180, but I don't have any 180, so I'm going to go to 220. All right, I got this sanded down to 220. Feels pretty nice. I am going to sand it one more time. I've already done this on the bottom side when I completely finished the bottom side. I'm going to put some water on this, get it wet. This is called raising the grain. And what it does is it brings the little fibers out in the wood, and then you sand those off. And it's much more important if you're doing a water-based finish to raise the grain, because if you were to just put a water-based finish over this, the finish itself can actually raise the grain. So by doing it, just by getting it wet, and then letting it dry, it'll bring the little fibers out in the wood, and then you just sand them off again. And I can feel it getting rougher as I'm putting water over it. Plus that looks nice. You get to kind of see what it's going to look like when it's finished. And we're going to let this dry completely. I don't know how long that'll take. Could be an hour or two. And I'm not saturating it, I'm just wetting it. I'm not using a water-based finish on this, so it's probably debatable whether this is necessary, but I do this when I'm making guitars as well, and it does give it a nicer finish, a smoother finish. So that's it. We'll let that sit, and then I'll sand it one more time with 220, and then I'll bring you back after that. You don't need to watch any more sanding, any more of that boring stuff. Okay, we're ready to do a finish on this thing. First thing I'm going to do is take a good clean rag and wipe everything down until I get no dust on my rag. So here's what we're putting on as a finish. Minwax fast drying polyurethane. It's an oil-based product, so it has a little smell to it, but it's not as bad as I was expecting it to be. So you don't want to shake the can, that introduces bubbles. So we're just going to, of course I've already opened this since I did the bottom side, so it's not going to take as much stirring as it would if it was a brand new can. But you want to just stir up the stuff and get the stuff off the bottom. Again, this doesn't really have any at this point, and you want to stir quietly, meaning you don't want to get in here and whip it around because you'll introduce air. So just stir quietly until your stuff is all mixed up good. And again, since I just did the bottom side last night, this is in pretty good shape already. And I just wipe this stuff off, and you can reuse the stick. And then the other thing I don't do is I don't pour my cans into anything, because as soon as you build up a stuff around here and put a lid on it again, the can never seals right. You can't hardly get them open. And it's just something that bothers me. It's like a pet peeve. But I just use a Dixie cup. And I've already learned that it takes about that much. And they do warn on this that there's a chance of spontaneous combustion. So I'm just putting everything in a metal pan with water. Okay, let me set up. Okay, on the can it says either use a good bristle brush or a foam brush. Good bristle brush is about $10, and then a foam brush is about $1.50. So guess what I chose? And I've already done it, so I know that it works just fine. So I'm just gonna, again quietly, meaning we don't have to whisper when we're doing it, but we want to be mindful of how we do this and not introduce any air. And of course, doing the edges here, some of it's going to want to drip down. So I'm going to go ahead and do the perimeter, or I'm going to do the whole thing, and then I'll come back and do a coat on the edges, because it inevitably will drip down there. So just give it a good coat. I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of this off camera, and then I'll bring you back right when I'm finished, and I'll show you what I'm doing at the very end. Okay. Now I'm going to do the edges. If you're wondering how long it took to get to this point on this finish, when I turned the camera off, I turned the radio on and Cashmere started playing. And when I just turned it off to bring you back, it was still playing. So it didn't take long. Okay, so as the last step of this, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my foam brush and I'm just going to slowly drag it down to level out any of the finish. And when I did the bottom side, I think I left too much on, because it says it's supposed to dry in 2 to 3 hours, or at least get pretty tacky, and it didn't. I had to leave it overnight. And my subsequent quotes, I think I put 4 coats on it. In the subsequent coats, I did this, and it really seemed to help level it out and make it dry quicker. And this finish does level out pretty nicely. So it might look a little rough when you first get it on here, which might give you the idea that you should be messing around with it and trying to level it, but don't do that. It levels really good. All I'm doing basically is just dragging it around and leveling it out, and any little bubbles or anything should come up. And basically now we're done. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get down on the ground, make sure that I don't have any drips that went around the edges and they're on the bottom side now. Actually, what I'm going to do is just bring my foam brush around like that, and if there is a drip, that will take care of it. Okay, see you in a couple hours. It is 8:30 now. I'll let you know what time it is when we come back. Okay, it's now 3 hours later, and it's just a little bit tacky. I'm going to go ahead and just put another coat on it. The directions say let it sit for 2-3 hours and then sand it with 220, I think it says, which I think is a little bit rough, but I don't have anything in it, and it all laid down nice and flat, so I'm just going to go ahead and put another coat on it and build it up a little bit. So I'll do that, and then I'll come back after I get another coat on. All right, a couple more hours has gone by. I did a little bit of rearranging in here, and I'm at the point where it's tacky again, just a little bit tacky. I've managed to keep all the dust and all the crud off of it, so I'm going to go ahead and just put another coat on, just the way it is. And this will be the third coat. So I'll do another one and then bring you back. Well, here it is with several coats on it. I think I made a mistake a little bit. I kind of knew I was doing it, and I did it anyway. I don't know why. So I should have sanded between each coat to get all the little nubs and stuff off, and I didn't do that. So I have several coats on here, and I'm going to try sanding this back now with 320 grit. I'm hoping it's built up enough and thick enough that I can just sand it and then buff it out and be done. But if I have to put another coat on, I will. I also think the sponge is probably not the way to go. So if you're doing this, I would go ahead and do the bristle brush. I think it works better. So let me hit this with some 320, and I'll bring you back and we'll see if it worked or not. So. So this is working perfectly. 320. It only took me a couple minutes to get this much of it done. And it's just basically flattening out that finish. And the finish too, when it dries, it shrinks a little bit. So the fact that I didn't sand between coats and kind of built it up the way I did also helped cause this. So basically, if I can explain what I'm feeling is, it almost feels like I'm feeling the grain of the wood. And the finish is just soaked into the grain, I believe. And then as it dries and shrinks, and then I add more and it dries and shrinks, it just made it worse and worse. But this is going to take care of it. So I'll finish this off with the 320, and then we'll see what we're going to do next and how shiny we want to make this thing. All right, for any of you that watch my videos, you know that I always show you my mistakes. Because sometimes it's funny, sometimes we can learn from it. See that spot right there? It looks a little discolored. Well, I was sanding this down with the 320 grit, like we talked about. I was using this mesh stuff, which works fantastic. Made very quick work out of this. I thought I was going to spend 10 minutes and then get ready to kind of buff this or whatever we wanted to do with it. And then the paper was getting a little bit clogged. I decided I should take it off, bang it out, clean it up. While I was doing that, I was holding my sander over the workpiece. It slipped out of my hands and landed right here. And it put a little ding in the finish, not the wood, just the finish. So I thought, all right, easy enough. I just kind of sanded around the area, put a little drop of finish in there, let it dry up, and then I was going to just sand it smooth which I did, and it sealed it, but right when I was finishing, I broke through right there. So I'm now going to clean all the dust off with this naphtha. It's basically lighter fluid. You can get it just about anywhere, but I will leave descriptions on links for a lot of the stuff I'm using in the description. So I'm going to clean it all up, get all the dust off, and then I'm going to give this one more coat after the shop air is good and clean. I'm going to turn my air filtration on for a while, get the shop air good and clean. I'm going to put one more coat on, and then I'm not going to do any more work in the shop until this is dry. And then we'll come back and finish it off. So don't do work over your nice work. Oops. I'll be back. All right, I already got this mostly wiped down. I'm just going to do one final wipe. You can probably hear all the noise. I've got my air filtration on and get the air cleaned out. Try to get all the dust out of here. And then we'll put our last coat on. And then I'll get out of the shop so I don't disturb it and make more problems for myself. All right. Hopefully this is the last time. Yeah, notice I'm using a foam brush. I don't take advice, I just give it, apparently. That, and I didn't have another brush, but this works okay. I just think it might be better to use a bristle brush. All right, it's got a nice coat on it. Let this dry for a few hours. Hopefully that's the last coat. All right, I just left it overnight to dry. I didn't touch it all day long. I stayed out of the shop, so I didn't kick up any dust. And guess what? I didn't mess it up. It looks great. I'm not going to touch it anymore. There's not a nib on it. The finish just flattened right out, and it's practically perfect. So I'm done messing with it. So I'm going to take it down and go give it to the folks, see if they like it, and get it on the rack. And I'll bring you back one last time to show you the finished product. So we'll see you in a bit. All right, well, there it is, all done. Hopefully you got something out of this and it inspires you to go out in your shop and build something. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.